Alex Lowe, Chris Foy and Chris Hewett. Let's start with the Autumn Internationals prospects for Ireland. Who wants to kick us off? Chris Hewett.
4 internationals for Ireland this year, which is outside of Regulation 9, and it's an absolute disgrace. All of us who think there's too much international rugby can start blaming the Irish as well as the English. I think Ireland will be competitive. They have very competitive. They have a world-class act at number 8 in Jamie Heath, who might be as good as anything around, and I include the Harron Orderkeys of this world in that description. He's been absolutely magnificent for Leinster recently. If they can get O'Driscoll fit and firing, Johnny Sexton terrific in midfield. They do carry threats all over the place. Luke Fitzgerald back in the squad after long-term injury. I fancy them to the extent that if their tight forwards are anywhere near up to it, they could well be the most vigorous of the 4 home nations over the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay, gents.
I think that's possibly one problem is O'Connell's absence. Paul O'Connell still injured, and it seems to have been a bit of a mystifying injury that sort of dragged on, and he's most recently said he expects to be back maybe end of November, start of December. Obviously too late for this. And
how convenient.
Well, you know, it's a real worry for them because they have other guys there, but I just don't think they're of the same calibre. But I think the key thing for Ireland is they've had all these players, this sort of, for want of a better phrase, this golden generation around for a few years now, and they've integrated younger players into it. But this, up until the World Cup now, is probably the last hurrah for a big, group of them who've come through together over a number of years, and they really need to build that momentum starting with these matches.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, any more to add on that?
I just think Chris mentioned Johnny Sexton, and I remember in 2003 there was a real battle for the starting fly half jersey, and I just wonder whether with Sexton and O'Gara that's going to continue, whether that'll do them both some good heading into the World Cup. Sexton is he's a class act, but he doesn't have the experience that O'Gara can bring to that midfield, and I just think in the build up to the World Cup he's really going to start kind of becoming a force in the European game.
Needing that experience.
Yeah.
He has sometimes gotten to pieces, isn't he? When the big moments, goal kicking wise, it has really sort of affected him, hasn't it? And that's what Rog offers that they can fall back on. It's just whether they decide to. How soon they have to take that sort of make that change in any game. I suppose to bring Rog in, if he's starting on the bench, then that's a sign that they might need to close out games, and that's what he can do.
They're in that happy position that England are in insofar as you can start with Flood, you can try and he's the outside half that will spark a back division, and if a game does need closing out or if there's some damage limitation to be done, which is always possible, you can bring the orthopaedically challenged Wilkinson off the bench.
Well, maybe we'll get on to England in a couple of minutes. Scotland. How do we think their prospects look? Starting to reassert themselves on the rugby map. We don't like to see them totally disappearing into obscurity, maybe where they've been for a number of years. Chris Foy, your thoughts on how they might be going into the autumn?
Well, Andy Robinson he's got them organised, isn't he? He's got them more sort of durable, harder to beat. They did well in Argentina in the summer, winning down there. He's got a good back row group to work with. They have had some injuries though, so but possibly. Still, they're thin in certain areas. There's not the depth that you may need, but it's clear that he's at least got them sort of steadied, and they're probably that much of a harder team to beat now. So they should expect. You'd expect them to have a chance of at least one decent scalp in the autumn.
We hope so, Alex.
Yeah, it comes down. Robbo's influence there has been huge, and Chris will probably elaborate on that a bit more. But I think what he's managed to instill in them is a solidity to them and a belief. And they took Australia's scalp last year with
no ball,
with no ball whatsoever. But they dogged it out, and they drew with England in another pretty dire game. But they dogged it out, and it was a kind
Is
of.
Robinson helping them win gritty?
Well, I think so, and also huge for them was winning over in Argentina in the summer. So actually they come into the autumn on the back of a series win over there and a draw with England, and they know that they managed to squeeze out the win against the Wallabies last year, and I think they're not going to be an easy team for anyone to overwhelm, and I think that's what Andy Robinson is bringing to them.
He's to my mind the outstanding forwards coach of this generation of coaches. and he's certainly done everything that my colleagues here have described. I do feel that of all the nations, Scotland are least able to absorb injuries. They've lost Strokosh, they've lost Johnny Beattie, they've lost Alistair Keddock, and Alistair Keddock was as good a second row as there was in the Six Nations.
No Cussiter.
No Cussiter. Also, the forward pack, the Scotland forward pack, until now has shown a sharp improvement, but with the loss of players of that calibre, they find it difficult to absorb that. So I would expect Scotland to take a little bit of a dip probably in the autumn because a couple of key players are missing, but I still think because they always tour well and they play good tournament rugby, they tend to do well at World Cups. I think there will be a very, very serious threat to England this time next year. I don't expect to see that manifested over the next few weeks because of injuries.
The other issue, talking of injuries, Tom Evans was going to be the guy who sort of ignited their wide game, and he had such a sort of menace and looked so promising and good pace and good hands, and this was possibly the answer to long-standing problems in those areas. You can't have a one-man answer, but part of the answer anyway. And of course, his sad retirement is another difficult setback for them to have to take, because that is what they're always crying out for, is game-breaking backs, and they don't come along up there very often.
And captaincy issues, Mike Blair, Rory Lawson.
Well, they're obviously sort of juggling their resources, aren't they? I mean, John Barclay's been tipped as an option as well, so it has been a bit of a revolving door in the last couple of years. So they obviously could do with getting that settled and looking ahead to the World Cup and have that sort of continuity. But it's easier said than done when you've got the injuries.
It is indeed. Okay. Wales then, fair few injuries there as well. Jamie Roberts, Ryan Jones, Lee Halfpenny, Lee Byrne. That's a back row and a hell of a back line that you're beginning to put some holes in there. Alex, do you want to start us off on Wales?
Yeah, Wales with a full strength team would be would be one of the biggest threats around, I think. But they've been decimated going into the autumn, and that injury list keeps getting longer and longer. And Matthew Rees captaining in the first game, they got a kind of stellar performer, prove himself with the Lions, and he's really come through. But I just fear that, a bit like Chris mentioned with Scotland, they've lost so many big name key players for them that I'm not quite sure whether they're going to be able to deliver the kind of results that their Welsh public demand of their team. And Gatland's got a 4-year deal, so he's built himself some security, but the World Cup is only a year away, and it's always a slightly risky move to give any coach a 4-year deal.
He's got that break clause in 2013 we've heard about as well, which could make things interesting. Mr. Hewett, your thoughts on Wales?
Interesting that Wales should put themselves in Capello land with a big contractual extension at this stage of the game. Yes, injuries will really hurt them. They are a lot better than they were relatively recently up front. They scrummaged extremely well against the All Blacks in Hamilton. 2 or 3 of us stayed on after the Australian tour and watched that game. And Paul James, who is second choice loosehead to Gethin Jenkins, scrummaged Tialata straight out of the All Black squad. He was their starting tight head prop on the Saturday night, and come the Sunday when Henry named his Tri-Nation squad, he was nowhere in the 30. They're going to have to box slightly clever with who they pick and where. We all know about Gethin Jenkins around the field, but he's not the world's greatest scrummager. Paul James is sort of turning into a match-winning scrummager, so it's going to be interesting to see what they do there. I think they will be better up front. I think people like Bradley Davis have come on a stack.
Last season, wasn't he, Bradley Davis? And just doing the dog work you want a lock to do. He was hitting rucks and making tackles, and he carried well, and he had some hard personal circumstances with the death of his mum, and he seemed to he just sort of grew as a player and really came on. I thought that was a huge positive for them.
Alan Wynne-Jones has come on a stack as well. So there's an issue about whether Martin Williams is still quite the thing. At some point they're going to have to give this guy Warburton a real run in the back row. I mean, people think he's the bee's knees. If he comes through, they will be better up front, and they do still have players of absolute class outside the scrum. Stephen Jones, Mike Phillips, James Hook, who I just think is O'Driscoll's natural heir as a Lions outside centre. I mean, they are class players, and Shane Williams as well. But whether they can absorb this recent rash of injuries is possibly doubtful.
I might be looking at a one-man Shane Williams attempt to get away with some of these.
Just on Bradley Davis, I think the Wales coaching team look at him as one of the key figures who can fill a leadership void when they're missing guys like Ryan Jones and some senior players. Bradley Davis has really made an impact in the Wales squad, and from what I can gather, they see him as quite a key kind of senior leadership guy already after the impact he made last season.
I just think, going on what you were saying about, you've got you've got the Ryan Jones issue, you've got Martin Williams, as you were saying, and how long can he go on for? I just think broadly there's possibly an issue in the back row in general that there's doubts sometimes. Ryan, there always seems to be either a doubt about fitness or occasionally doubts about form, the question over the leadership. Then you've got Martin Williams, how long can he go on for? You've got Andy Powell, who's got in a situation where he's banned from the squad for a while, then he comes back in and then immediately he's out again, at least temporarily, because of the fact he's now based in England. And you just look and think that unit is sort of breaking up, and it's neither here nor there.
It's saying to Forsyth, doesn't it, as well? I mean, they must be squealing with embarrassment now at letting Gareth Delve go to Melbourne. I mean, Delve, injury problems and all that stuff. But when he first came into the Bath setup as an 18, 19-year-old, people like Brian Ashton thought he was going to be a game-changing, a sport-changing player. And what he's lost a bit of pace, as Delalio did with all his knee problems, he's still a fantastic carrying forward, absolutely magnificent. And to let him go and then have this rash of issues, Ryan Jones, Andy Powell, it was a pretty dumb move.
They've got, Jonathan Thomas is in the mix as well, but he's played lock a bit too, and he's never quite settled. But I mean, the thing they've got in their favour is that the Scarlets are starting to produce. A few of these young guys have started to come through, and okay, they had a horrible setback at Leicester in the Heineken Cup, but I think they're starting to produce players who can kick on into Test rugby. But it's a bit late in the cycle of World Cup years to be integrating that sort of player now. If that had happened 2 years ago, then we could have been talking about McCusker and Turnbull and guys coming in and really being set, and they'd have had more options. As it is, they don't.
They did finish that game in Leicester back in Llanelli, didn't they? I mean, they were pushed a long way back. Crikey, they may not have stopped. They may be in the sea for all we know by now.